Tenants and advocates in Massachusetts failed at their attempt to remove the ban on rent control within the state, but they haven't given up yet. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the state of Massachusetts. Now, I did report to you when the new mayor of Boston was elected, she promised that she was going to try to get rent control passed within the city, right? So, what they're trying to do is change the state law to allow local municipalities to be able to set rent control rules within, their little area, right? And the thing is, they wanted to put a ballot measure out there on the ballot in 2024 that would repeal the statewide ban. Well, it needed a certain number of signatures, and they were unable to get that number of signatures. But they're not giving up. Of course, they're not giving up. They're going to keep trying to push this horrible idea that has been proven to be a complete failure over and over again. They're going to keep pushing it because they have no true solutions. They don't want to do the things that are actually necessary in order to provide the affordable housing that people need. Basically allowing builders to build, removing government regulation, allowing the markets to dictate, what is built and what isn't built. I mean, you got to remember that Boston metropolitan area, it's a very, very expensive place because it's popular. It's a place where a lot of people want to live. It's not just because greedy landlords or whatever idiocy they came up with in their heads. Okay. So, I think it's a bad idea to even think that rent control is the solution to the affordable housing problem. It isn't. We need more supply, a lot more supply. And they're not willing to do what it takes in order to double the number of housing units out there. That would lower prices if they suddenly had double the number of housing units under construction. I mean, it would be a lot cheaper to find housing if it wasn't so much red tape, so much regulation, so much government interference in the free markets. Okay, so before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So, in the case of Boston in particular, right? Do you think that they're going to eventually pass a a statewide rent control, or pass a law that allows local municipalities to have rent control, or do you think that this law that is banning rent control right now, do you think it's going to stay in place? Now, obviously, in the past, at some point in time, the people they spoke, they said, "Hey, we see the writing on the wall. We see what's going to happen. We know that rent control is a bad idea, so we're going to ban it right now and make it much harder to get these sort of things passed." And I think that was a good thing. That, they were thinking ahead back in the past when they did that. But I do believe that at some point in time, it's going to fall. It's going to fall off. People are going to forget the lessons that they learned from the last time they had rent control. Because I believe I had read that in Massachusetts, they had rent control before, and it was so strict that basically 100% of the development stopped. It just was gone. And that was part of the reason why the ban passed, because they were like, well, no new housing is being built. Nobody wants to build housing for some reason. We can't figure out why. And they realized that it was directly linked to the fact that they had that rent control law. Okay. So, anyway, let me get into this article. They're going into the details of what they are trying to do right now to continue to get rent control passed. Let's hope it doesn't happen, but we'll see. This article is coming from the BostonHerald.com, and it says, "Rent control needed now. Advocates tell Legislative Joint Committee. Opponents say the outlawed policy discourages new construction." Yeah, it discourages new construction, and it also forces landlords into the position where they can't provide the maintenance necessary to keep their properties up to date. Okay, they can't keep pace with inflation. They are stuck in a position where, hey, no matter what we do, we lose. So a lot of landlords just get out of the business. That means that there's going to be fewer housing units. Not like they're going to just maintain the number that they have right now. No, there's going to be fewer and fewer as time goes on. And we've already seen this example in places like New York. Okay, so anyway, let's get into this article. Depending on who you ask, the rent is too darn high, and lawmakers need to act to prevent Massachusetts families from being pushed out of their homes or it's just high enough to keep developers from abandoning the housing construction projects the state desperately needs. The Joint Committee on Housing sat through 6 hours of at times emotional testimony on Tuesday as representatives and senators considered a handful of bills proposing various measures of rent control and tenant protections. The proposals would, in effect, overturn a state law narrowly passed by referendum in 1994 that bars Massachusetts municipalities from making their own rent control rules. Tenants and landlords alike spoke to lawmakers during the hearing, though, as might be expected, the owners were greatly outnumbered by the leaseholders. And that's always going to be a problem whenever we're fighting against any of these sort of laws, right? There's always going to be more tenants out there than there are landlords. But my logic is that, hey, maybe there are people out there with reasonable minds, people out there who are just plain homeowners who want to maintain their property rights. Maybe there are people out there who are business owners who understand that, hey, we're operating a business just like they operate a business, and these artificial price controls aren't going to work. Maybe there are people out there who have a more libertarian, small government mindset and just don't believe in pushing this big government nonsense over the free markets. Okay, but whatever it might be, we might have just enough sway and pull to keep this sort of thing from passing. Okay, and I can't say for sure. I'm not from Massachusetts. I know it's a very, very left leaning, very liberal state, right? At least within the major city. But for as far as I know, the whole metropolitan area takes up the entire state because it's a pretty small state. But maybe there's areas and maybe there's pockets of more conservative leaning area parts that would say, hey, we want these property rights. We already know the failings of rent control, and we're not dumb. That's what my hope is. Okay, because I don't want to see rent control spread any more than it already has. And lately, especially after the pandemic, it seems like there have been more and more places pushing for these rent control laws, these ridiculous laws that are only hurting the housing market, not helping it. The bill's consideration comes just days after the collapse of a campaign to undo the 1994 law fell short of signature requirements to make the 2024 ballot. It also comes as the region is falling short of housing construction goals required to meet the needs of a growing population. Representative Mike Connolly of Cambridge, a driving force behind the ballot initiative, encouraged his colleagues to act on behalf of strapped Bay State renters. And then this guy, he starts spewing a bunch of nonsense. And I'm going to go through this nonsense because it sounds kind of dumb when you really, really think about what he's saying. If you look at the history, if you look at the analysis, rent control is perfectly compatible with housing production, and we can do it in a way that protects our small landlords and is fair to all concerned, Connolly said. With this unprecedented housing emergency, my respectful request to my colleagues on the Housing Committee is that we work to advance the rent control bill favorably this session. And everything he just said was complete garbage, okay? Complete garbage. So he's like, if you look at the analysis, rent control is compatible with housing production? Where? Which city that has implemented rent control has not seen a huge decline in the number of housing that is, in the amount of housing that is being developed? Now, don't talk to me about places that, oh, well, they exempt new housing. Well, even in the places where they exempt newer housing, the development is still much, much less than it was before they implemented the rent control laws. And the reason is simple, okay? Because usually it's a sliding thing. Oh, if the property's over 10 years old, then they instantly fall into the rent control laws. So eventually, even a brand new property will be stuck under rent control, right? And nobody wants that. A lot of people, they want to be able to set their rents at whatever value they need in order to pay their bills and make a reasonable profit. But if you say, oh, well, we're going to sit here and, after 10 years, force a property under rent control, well, that property is not going to be worth nearly as much after that 10 years is up, okay? The other thing is, how are you going to respect a small landlord with the rent control law? And they're going to, oh, well, we're going to exempt, somebody who only owns 1 or 2 units or whatever, right? And I always ask, like, well, for how long? For how long are you going to exempt those? Before long, you'll be like, listen, we need to put those guys under rent control too, and because that's where the people are really suffering. And even then, what do you consider to be a small landlord? Because uh, a single individual, such as myself, who owns a 10 unit apartment building, you would qualify that as, well, that's a big landlord, so you're stuck under rent control. You know, it's idiotic. It's idiotic because simply put, you could be a guy who owns 500 single family houses, or 500, I guess in a place like Boston that's more densely populated, like townhouses or row houses, 500 individual units, right? And not have to fall under rent control. But if you own one 10-unit building, you would be stuck under rent control. That's how idiotic these laws work. And my other issue is, right, and going back to the problems with rent control, is it's not means tested, meaning that they give rent control protections to people who don't necessarily need it. So you're going to have all these people up here making six figures plus, right? And they're going to benefit from this law when they don't need their rent subsidized. They don't need it. It's idiotic. It is absolutely idiotic. The way rent control works is dumb. And, it's not going to help with the development of new housing. It's not going to make more landlords want to participate and be landlords, okay? The only thing it's going to do is drive people out of business, make housing less affordable, and make things worse overall. And, I'm glad that their little signature drive to get this rent control law, voted on again, it didn't pass, but they're trying other ways. They're going straight to the legislator, hoping that, oh well, we're not even going to allow this to be put up to a vote by the people. We're just going to try to use our politicians to throw something at the people that they don't want. Okay. And I hate it when I see this sort of thing. So anyway, I'll put a link to the article down below and you can read more about it. But man, we might be seeing rent control in Massachusetts pretty soon.